So the topic of today's video is Microsoft. And obviously they're a household name. I mean, Bill Gates was the richest man alive, for God's sake. But what have they been up to? How is it possible that they have over a $1.5 trillion valuation, larger than the likes of Apple and Amazon, yet you don't hear a peep about what they're doing or what they've been up to? And what makes them so special? What changed? Because it sure wasn't like this a decade ago. This is Techonomics. Hey, it's Carlos, always trying to provide you with insight on technology and how it's affecting you and the world at large. So, Microsoft has been making some changes to their business model that's fairly unusual for a tech company. But before we understand where they're going and why, we need to understand where they came from. So let's get some context. Microsoft was founded back in 1975 by Bill Gates and Paul Allen. But the company wouldn't really hit a gold mine until 1980 when IBM asked them to build an operating system for their computers. This single project ended up revolutionizing the company and would be the foundation for decades to come. Microsoft's operating system, Windows, was extremely successful and led to mass adoption of personal computers. It was so successful, in fact, that by 1993, 95% of personal computers had it as their operating system. It's also important to note that at this point, Microsoft was one of the world's most profitable and successful companies. But it's even more important to know why, which, in a word, it was Windows. In the 90s, Microsoft's success is solely attributable to selling computers and desktop software. This can be seen in their 1996 shareholder report, where $4 billion of the $8.67 billion in revenue that year is attributed to desktop application product revenues. And you can add another $2.5 billion if you include OEM-related revenues, which is basically the cut Microsoft gets for other companies selling computers with Windows pre-installed on it. So Microsoft had a ton of success, but then they decided to diversify in areas that they didn't really understand, which led them to losing their identity along the way. Instead of leading the industry, Microsoft ended up playing catch-up with a bunch of other companies and forgot what got them their success in the first place. A great example of this is Xbox. While it did eventually become successful, they were the underdog for almost a decade, and they were only able to catch up in 2009 with the Xbox 360, and this was only because they ended up selling their previous generation console at a loss to entice new customers. They even managed to ruin their bread and butter, Windows. In 2006, they reinvented Windows to a version called Vista, and to this day, it's considered to be one of the worst, if not the worst version of Windows in history. Users didn't want to switch over, and the ones who did ended up regretting it. And worst of all, businesses and governments ended up never switching over. Many, to this day, still run Windows XP, the version before Vista, because of better security and privacy. But it doesn't end there. Probably the greatest example of Microsoft failing at copying a product is Windows Phone back in 2010. Windows Phone, obviously, was Microsoft's attempt at making Windows be able to run on your smartphone. As you can imagine, they made this to be able to compete with the iPhone, which had taken the world by storm. But it was a complete and utter failure. So much so that back in 2017, they discontinued the Windows Phone only 7 years after the original Windows Phone was launched. So here's the thing. Every company has its ups and downs, but unlike other companies, Microsoft was able to find a unique path for themselves. They did this by focusing on business solutions, and while it might not be very flashy, it provided a sense of stability that most companies could only dream of. So what do I mean by business solutions? Well, instead of focusing on everyday consumers like you and like me, Microsoft decided to change who their target customer was. They decided to pinpoint businesses as their ideal customer, which in turn allowed them to sell products in much larger quantities because businesses are just made up of more people. Also, businesses have more money to spend, which frankly makes it a no-brainer. The first great example of Microsoft changing their approach was Office. For years, you were only able to buy Office as a one-time purchase. But now you can purchase Microsoft 360, which runs on a subscription model. And while we can leave the importance of the subscription model to the tech industry as a whole for another video, what's important to note about this move for Microsoft is that they're able to get consistent, reoccurring revenue by offering just a few more perks to their subscription service. Companies are more than willing to purchase this service because in most industries, Microsoft Office is the standard. Knowing this, Microsoft has released a new product in hopes that it becomes the standard as well. Microsoft Teams. Teams is basically Skype for Business, but a lot better. Microsoft released this product to compete with Slack, which has basically taken over the communication space, especially in software development. But what made releasing Teams so special was that Microsoft was able to bundle it with existing services, like Office, making it a no-brainer for most businesses. Why would you pay for Slack that has no integration with applications you already use when you can purchase Teams that's cheaper because of the bundle and is very well integrated with existing applications like Office? It is no wonder why Teams has taken the business world by storm since coming out, dwarfing the growth of an application like Slack. Microsoft also tried to entice businesses in a completely new space with their product called Azure. Azure is an AWS competitor, so their business model is cloud computing. If you want to learn more about that, please check out my video on Amazon Web Services. But much like other products they've been focusing on, they're providing new and enticing solutions to businesses. And at least in this space, they're successful enough to be one of the top players. Not only that, they're basically the only competitor that's able to compete with Amazon in any significant way, unlike other companies that basically have no market share in the space. The proof is in the pudding. In 2020, when they were extremely successful and profitable, 33.5% of their revenue was coming from productivity and business processes, 31.56% was in intelligent cloud, and only 34.94% was in personal computing. A big change from the 90s where roughly 75% of revenue came from something to do with personal computing. But here's my last point. This change within Microsoft was only possible because of a change in culture and priorities within the company. And this change was spearheaded by Satya Nadella, who became CEO of Microsoft back in 2014. And that shift wasn't only to focus on businesses. It was also a change in how they treated businesses. They became much more partner positive. They evolved from a competitive approach with other businesses to a much more collaborative one. Microsoft was only able to get to where it is today by working with other businesses to release products and find solutions where all parties involved benefit. What's great about the Microsoft story is that while they ended up hitting a new low, they were able to reinvent themselves by focusing on business solutions and changing their approach to be more collaborative. This, in turn, took the company to heights that they never thought possible. And hopefully it's something that might be applicable in your lives, because sometimes rethinking your approach is the only way to move forward. Okay guys, thanks for watching another video. Please hit that like button if you want to see more videos like this one. It helps with the algorithm, and leave a comment down below with your thoughts on Microsoft and their new business approach and whether or not you guys actually have been keeping up with them. Again, this is Carlos from Techonomics, over and out.